Okay, so in this example here, we're going to be talking about how to find the equation of a circle in standard form. So what you're looking at right now is the template for a circle in standard form. You can see that you have x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equal to r squared. Now h and k, that is going to be the center of your circle, and r is the radius. X and y, that represents any point on the circle. Now, that's not really important in this video because all we're trying to do here is put it in this format here. So they're going to end up giving you an equation of a circle that is not in this format, standard form, and they want you to go ahead and put it in standard form. So let's go ahead and take a look at our first example here, and we'll talk about how we're going to do this problem. So here's our first example, and they give us an equation of a circle, but it is not in standard form, and they want us to put it in standard form. Now, before I talk about how we're going to do this, you have to know how to complete the square. If you don't know how to complete the square, you're not going to be able to do these examples. Now, luckily, I have videos on completing the square. I'll go ahead and link those below. That way you have access to that content. But if you do not know how to complete the square, you are not going to know how to do these problems here. So make sure you're proficient with completing the square before you try to do these problems here. With that being said, I'm going to assume you know how to complete the square, and let's talk about how we're going to do these problems. So you can see that they give me this big mess of an equation here, and they want me to put it in that template that we saw at the beginning. Again, if you forgot, it was x minus h squared plus y minus k squared, all equal to my radius squared, okay? That's the template they want us to put it in. So you may want to write that down, take a screenshot, do what you need to do, but that's something you're going to have to memorize, okay? So to do that, you want to group together all of your terms first. So for example, I want to group together all of my terms that contain x, and I want to group together all of my terms that contain y. I then want to take my constant and move it over to the right-hand side. So let's talk about what that's going to look like. Let me get rid of this stuff here. And so looking at all of my x terms, I have that here, and I have that here. So I'm going to group those together. I'm going to write it as x squared plus 2x, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and cross them out so I know I used them. And now I'm going to group together my y terms. Well, I only have a y squared, so I'm going to write plus y squared. And then this negative 99, that's our constant. We want to move it over to the right-hand side, okay? Equal to 99. So we're pretty much putting it in the format that we need to be in for completing the square. You can see right here, if I just look at this part here, I'm in the correct format for completing the square where I have x squared plus or minus bx equal to c. The only difference here, you have multiple terms here, and that's typically something you don't see when you are completing the square and solving for a quadratic. But it's going to be the same deal. You're just going to be doing it more than once. So for example, let me get rid of this here. We're now going to complete the square, meaning we're going to do b over 2 squared on both sides. So I have to identify what my b is. Well, my b here is 2. And my b coming after this y squared is going to be 0y. So what I'm going to do here to make it a little more visual, I'm going to rewrite the problem. It's going to be x squared plus 2x plus y squared plus a 0y equal to 99. Okay, so now I'm going to do b over 2 squared on both sides. I'm going to work on this portion first, and then I'll work on this portion. So b over 2 squared, working on this portion here, I'm going to get b all over 2 squared. This will be equal to, well, my b is 2, so I get 2 over 2 squared, which is equal to 1 squared. Now, if you watch those videos on completing the square, you know that I always underline this part here, which is b over 2 simplified, because that's the value we're going to use when we go to factor. Okay, it will always work out that way. And then when I do the final step here, 1 squared, I get 1. Meaning I have to add 1 on both sides. So for example, when I go to rewrite this, I'm going to do x squared plus 2x plus 1. And then on the right-hand side, I'll do 99 plus 1. Now, before I can do that, I have to take care of this portion here. Okay? So you can see it's a little bit different than your traditional completing the square when you're solving a quadratic. You actually have to do it 2 times here, okay? So the second time is going to be b over 2 squared, and this time my b is 0, so I'm going to put 0 over 2 squared, which we know is going to be 0. I'm going to underline it anyways because that's the value we're going to use when we factor. And I know that 0 squared is going to be 0, meaning I have to add 0 on both sides. Okay, so I'm pretty much doing nothing there. So rewriting the problem, I'm going to write x squared plus 2x, and then plus 1. We have to grab this value here. So plus 1, and then I write plus y squared plus a 0y plus 0. I'm going to write it anyways, equal to 99. And again, what we do to one side, we have to do to the other side. Well, I added 1 and I added a 0. So I'm going to put plus 1 and then plus 0. Okay? From here, you want to factor it, and then you're pretty much done. So we're going to factor the left-hand side, simplify down the right-hand side, and you will have this circle in standard form. So factoring it is super easy. So remember, we're going to factor this portion here and then this portion here. And factoring it, that's why I underline this value right here. That's the value we're going to use. So for example, I'm going to write x, then grabbing that value is positive 1. So plus 1, square it, done, you factored that portion. Then you go on to this portion here. So I underline this value. It's going to end up being y plus 0 squared. So just so you can see it, it's plus y plus 0 squared, which we know is going to reduce down to y squared. Okay? So I'm just going to write it as y squared. So I'm going to get rid of this portion here, and I'm going to write y squared like that. All equal to, well, 99 plus 1 plus 0 is 100. And there it is. You now have the circle in standard form. It's right here. Okay, let's try another example. So here's our next example. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to group together our x variables, group together our y variables, move the constant over, and then we're going to complete the square. So we're going to go a little bit quicker here. We're going to write x squared plus 2x. And you can cross them out so you know you're done. So I'm done here, and then plus y squared minus 8y equal to, I have to take that positive 8 and move it to the right-hand side. I'll get negative 8 here, okay? Now we can go ahead and complete the square. And again, we're going to do it on this portion here and this portion here. So doing the first portion, we're going to get b over 2 squared, which is equal to, well, my b here is 2, all over 2 squared, which ends up being 1 squared. And so when we reduce that down, we get 1. And again, I'm going to underline this part here because that's the value I'm going to use when I go to factor. I now have to do it on this part here. So I'm going to do, again, b over 2 squared, which is equal to, well, my b here is negative 8. So I get negative 8 all over 2 squared, which is going to be equal to a negative 4 squared. And I know that negative 4 squared is going to be 16. So I get plus 16. So I have to add 1 and 16 on both sides here. So rewriting it, I get x squared plus 2x, add the 1, okay, and then plus y squared minus 8y, now add the 16, okay. Then on the right-hand side, again, we have to add 1 and 16 as well. So negative 8 plus 1, and then plus 16, okay. Now we can go ahead and factor and simplify it down. So we're going to factor this part here. We're going to factor this part here and then simplify down this portion here. And then we'll have the equation of the circle in standard form. This is the easy part, right? Because we underline our values over here. So we're going to get x, and the value that I underlined here was 1. So it's going to be plus 1 and then squared. So that portion is factored. On this portion here, we're going to have plus y. And I didn't underline this value, but it's right here. It's negative 4. That's b over 2 simplified. So I'm going to write y minus 4, square it, and then equal to, we just have to simplify this down, then we're good. So a negative 8 plus 1, that will give you negative 7, and then negative 7 plus 16, you get positive 9 here. So I'm just going to write positive 9, and there it is. I now have the equation of the circle in standard form right here. Okay? So that one is done. And so again, if you were being asked, what is the center of the circle? You would say, well, I have a 1 here and I have a negative 4. That means my center is going to be negative 1, comma, positive 4. Remember, it's always opposite when you're pulling it out. This is really h and k. Okay. And then your radius, remember, this 9 is r squared. So your radius here is really 3. Okay. So your radius would be equal to 3 here. All right. Okay, let's try one more example. Okay, so here's our last example, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to group together the x variables, group together the y variables, move our constant over, and then we'll go for it. So I'm going to write here x squared, and then I have minus 8x, and then I'll have plus y squared, and then plus 16y, and then equal to a positive 1 because I'm moving that negative 1 over. Just do a quick check. Make sure you used all your terms. I used it, used it, and used it. I'm good. All right. So now we're going to do b over 2 squared so that we can complete the square. So again, I'm going to do it to this part here and this part here. So doing the first part, I'm going to get b over 2 squared, which is going to be equal to, well, my b here is negative 8 all over 2 squared. That reduces down to negative 4 squared. And we know that negative 4 squared will be positive 16. Underline this part. You're going to need it later, right? Now doing the other portion, again, I get b over 2 squared. My b here will be 16, positive 16. So positive 16 over 2 squared. That reduces down to 8. So I have 8 squared. Underline this part. We need it later. 8 squared is 64. So now I'm going to add that on all sides. I get x squared minus 8x. The value we got here was positive 16. And then we have plus y squared plus 16y. And then plus 64 equal to, we have to add it all here now. So I get 1 plus 16 plus 64. Trying to fit it in. Hopefully you can read that. And now we're going to factor and simplify it down. Okay, so we're factoring this part here, factoring this part here, and then simplifying down this part here. Okay, so factoring this part, super easy. We get x. The value that we underlined was negative 4, so I put negative 4 here, square it. Okay, the next part I get plus y. The value that we underlined here was positive 8, so plus 8, square it. That part's done. All equal to, so here we get 1 plus 16 plus 64. That will give you 81, so we get 81, and there it is. This is the equation of the circle in standard form. So again, we can identify different parts of the circle now. If you were asked, what is the center? Well, your center is going to be right here, h and k. And we know that when I pull these values out, it's always going to be the opposite sign based on how that template is written that I showed you at the beginning. So the center here is really going to be 4, comma, negative 8. Okay, that's my center. And then your radius is going to be positive 9 because r squared right here is going to be 81. So if I take the square root of 81, I get positive 9. So your radius would be positive 9. Okay, so again, that is the benefit of putting it in standard form. When you're dealing with a circle, you're able to identify the center and the radius very easily. And that's how you put it in standard form. Again, you have to complete the square, and that's really all there is to it. So if you found the video helpful, if it helped you in any way, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. That would be greatly appreciated. Also, make sure you subscribe to this channel. That way you get more math videos in the future, and I'll see you in the next one.